Have you ever wondered why freedom feels so elusive? Why every time you think you've broken free from something, you find yourself trapped by something else? You escape one toxic relationship only to fall into another. You quit the job that drained you, only to feel equally empty somewhere else. You break one bad habit, and three more grow in its place. What if I told you that everything you've been taught about freedom is a lie? That real freedom isn't found by fixing yourself, but by burning the false self entirely. What if the very pursuit of comfort, peace, and acceptance is the very thing keeping you enslaved? By the end of this video, you'll understand why Friedrich Nietzsche believed that true freedom must be forged in fire, why your deepest conflicts aren't obstacles, but the crucible where your real self is born, and why the war you've been avoiding is the only path to the liberation you crave. This isn't about becoming stronger or more motivated. It's about realizing that the self you've built, the one chasing safety, approval, and meaning, is the very thing that must die. Because freedom doesn't come through improvement. It comes through destruction, through fire, through the courage to kill who you were. Think about the last time you felt truly free, not happy, not comfortable, but genuinely free. Can't remember? That's because what you've been calling freedom isn't freedom at all. It's just a more comfortable form of slavery. You're not in chains, you're in a penthouse cage, velvet bars, a view, room service, and yet, you're not free. Nietzsche understood something that modern society desperately wants to hide from you. Most of what you call freedom is actually sophisticated control. You're given choices between pre-approved options and told you're free. You're encouraged to express yourself within carefully defined boundaries and told you're authentic. But real freedom is terrifying. It requires you to take complete responsibility for who you become. It demands that you create your own values instead of inheriting them. Freedom is the will to be responsible for ourselves, Nietzsche wrote in Twilight of the Idols. Most people recoil from this kind of freedom. They prefer the comfort of being told what to value, what to pursue, how to live. They mistake obedience for virtue and conformity for peace. But you feel it, don't you? That restlessness, that sense that something is wrong with this picture, that nagging suspicion that the life you're living isn't actually yours. That's your authentic self, trying to break free from the beautiful prison you've been taught to love. Here's something that will disturb you. The moral system you live by wasn't created by the strong, the noble, or the free. It was created by the weak, the resentful, and the enslaved. On the Genealogy of Morals, Nietzsche revealed one of the most shocking insights in philosophy. Throughout most of human history, the powerful defined what was good. Good meant strong, noble, beautiful, healthy, proud. Their morality was what Nietzsche called master morality, values created from a position of strength. But there were others, the weak, the oppressed, the resentful. They couldn't compete on the field of strength, so they did something ingenious. They flipped the entire game. They turned weakness into virtue and strength into sin. Humility became noble, suffering became sacred, meekness became blessed, and pride, strength, and power became evil. Slave morality from the outset says no to what is outside, what is different, what is not itself, Nietzsche observed. This wasn't conscious conspiracy, it was psychological survival. If you can't win, you change the rules. If you can't rise, you make rising wrong. You live in that conquered world. You've inherited values created not by the strongest or most life-affirming humans in history, but by the most resentful. This is why you feel guilty for wanting more, why you apologize for taking up space, why you've been taught that ambition is selfish, that power corrupts, that strength is dangerous. You've been programmed to fear the very qualities that could set you free. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. How much of your morality is actually just disguised resentment? When you judge others for their success, is that really about justice or about your own failure to achieve what they have? When you criticize someone for being too confident, is that really about virtue or about your own fear of standing out? Nietzsche understood that resentment is one of the most toxic forces in human psychology. It masquerades as morality, but it's actually poison that slowly destroys your capacity for authentic action. The resentful person can't create, so they critique. They can't build, so they tear down. They can't rise, so they make rising itself seem evil. And here's the insidious part. They convince themselves that their resentment is actually virtue. They call their inability to act being considerate. They call their fear of conflict keeping the peace. They call their refusal to compete being spiritual. But beneath the surface, the poison festers. Every time they see someone living boldly while they play it safe, the resentment grows. This is why so many people who seem good on the surface are actually bitter underneath. They've built their entire identity on not doing what they secretly wish they had the courage to do. Resentment is the enemy of freedom. As long as you're motivated by what you're against rather than what you're for, you're still being controlled by external forces. True freedom requires moving beyond resentment entirely. And that requires something most people will never do, embracing what Nietzsche called the will to power. Everything you've been taught about human nature is wrong. You weren't born to be safe, comfortable, or content. According to Nietzsche, there is one fundamental drive that animates all life, the will to power. Life itself is will to power, he declared, not will to survive. That's just the minimum. Will to power, the drive to grow, expand, create, overcome, and become more than you are. This isn't about crushing others. It's about refusing to be crushed by the parts of yourself you've abandoned or suppressed. It's about mastering yourself. It's about the audacity to create your own values instead of inheriting someone else's. The will to power is what drives the artist to create despite poverty, the entrepreneur to build despite failures, the philosopher to think despite ridicule. But modern society has taught you to suppress this drive. You've been conditioned to see ambition as selfishness, growth as greed, and the desire to excel as arrogance. Suppressing your will to power is what's making you miserable. You feel weak because you're denying your essential nature. You feel lost because you're following someone else's map. The first step toward freedom is reconnecting with this primal drive. But reclaiming your will to power requires confronting everything that's been holding it down. It requires what Nietzsche called the three metamorphoses of the spirit. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche described 3 stages of spiritual development that reveal the path to authentic freedom. The camel. Picture a camel in the desert, loaded down with supplies, trudging endlessly across the sand. Strong, enduring, reliable, but utterly burdened. What is difficult? Asks the spirit that would bear much, and kneels down like a camel wanting to be well loaded. You recognize this, don't you? You've spent years collecting burdens. The career your parents wanted for you, even though it drains your soul. The relationships you maintain out of obligation, even though they suffocate your growth. The beliefs you inherited without question, even though they contradict your experience. The camel believes that strength means endurance, that virtue means sacrifice. But there's a cruel irony here. The stronger you become as a camel, the more burdens you're given to carry. The lion? I will was the rallying cry of the camel. But the lion says something different. The lion says, I will not. The lion cannot yet create new values, but it can create freedom for new creation that the lion can do. The lion represents the stage where you finally stop accepting everything imposed on you and start rejecting what doesn't serve your authentic development. The lion must fight what Nietzsche called the great dragon, a beast covered in scales, and on each scale is written, "Thou shalt be humble, thou shalt be grateful, thou shalt not want more than you have." Every thou shalt is a limitation someone else placed on your will to power, and the lion's job is to destroy them all. The child is innocence and forgetting, a new beginning, a game, a self-rolling wheel, a first movement, a sacred yes. After the camel's endurance and the lion's destruction comes something completely different, the spontaneous creativity of the child. The child doesn't carry inherited burdens like the camel. It doesn't need to fight against imposed values like the lion. It simply creates, freely, joyfully, without apology. This is the stage where you finally become who you are. The child creates new values from pure affirmation rather than reaction. But here's what's crucial. You can't reach the child stage without going through the camel and lion phases. The path to freedom isn't around struggle, it's through struggle. You must be ready to burn yourself in your own flame. How could you rise anew if you have not first become ashes? This quote from Thus Spoke Zarathustra contains perhaps the most important truth about freedom ever written. You cannot become free by adding something to who you are. You can only become free by destroying who you've been. Real transformation isn't improvement, it's death and rebirth. Think about every major change in your life. The times when you actually grew, when you actually broke through to something new, they all involve some form of ending, didn't they? You can't add freedom to a life built on slavery. You can't insert authenticity into a personality constructed for approval. You have to burn it all down and start fresh. God is dead. God remains dead. And we have killed him, Nietzsche proclaimed in The Gay Science. This wasn't celebration, it was a warning. All the old authorities, all the inherited meanings, all the external sources of value have lost their power. And that means you're on your own. No one is coming to save you. No system will give you purpose. No authority will tell you what your life should mean. You have to create it all yourself. But here's Nietzsche's crucial insight. If you kill old values without creating new ones, you fall into nihilism, the belief that nothing matters. This journey isn't self-indulgent destruction. It's the necessary clearing of space for authentic creation. This is the ultimate freedom, the freedom to become the author of your own existence. But it's also the ultimate responsibility. The individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. Here's what no one tells you about freedom. It's lonely. When you stop carrying everyone else's burdens, they'll call you selfish. When you stop accepting inherited values, they'll call you lost. When you start creating your own path, they'll call you arrogant. This isn't because they're bad people. It's because your freedom threatens their slavery. Your refusal to accept limitations reminds them of the limitations they've accepted. You become a mirror that reflects back everything they're too afraid to see about themselves. So they'll try to pull you back. Guilt, shame, fear, obligation. They'll use them all to pull you back into the herd. And here's the test. Will you have the courage to stand alone? Because that's what freedom ultimately requires, the willingness to be completely alone if necessary. Not because you hate others, but because you refuse to betray yourself for the illusion of belonging. All creators are alone, Nietzsche observed, and creation is what freedom is for, the magnificent, terrifying opportunity to create something that has never existed before, the authentic expression of who you are. We've journeyed through Nietzsche's most radical insights about freedom. You've seen how slave morality enslaves you, how resentment poisons you, how the will to power can liberate you, and how the three metamorphoses can transform you. But now comes the most important question. What will you do with this knowledge? Become who you are, Nietzsche commanded, not who you were told to be. Who you are when every external expectation is stripped away and only your essential nature remains. This isn't a comfortable process. It will require you to disappoint people who expect you to stay small. It will demand that you walk away from situations that seem successful but feel empty. But here's what awaits you on the other side: the unprecedented experience of living a life that's actually yours. A life where your choices emerge from your deepest values rather than others' expectations. A life where your energy is directed toward what matters to you rather than what you think you should care about. A life where you can face yourself without shame. What does not kill me makes me stronger, Nietzsche wrote. But he also understood that some things need to be killed: the false self, the inherited limitations, the comfortable lies. Freedom isn't found, it's forged, not in the absence of struggle, but in the fire of conscious transformation. If this video has awakened something in you, if you feel that restless stirring of your authentic self trying to break free, then don't let this moment pass. Subscribe to this channel for more insights that challenge comfortable assumptions about how life should be lived. And tell me in the comments, what's one burden you've been carrying that isn't actually yours? What's one thou shalt you're ready to reject? What's one aspect of your authentic self you've been too afraid to express? Your freedom begins with the courage to answer those questions honestly. The cage is open, but no one will drag you out. You have to step through the fire, alone, naked, and willing to burn.